feel your max with Brooks Running and the all-new Ghost Max 2. They're the shoes you deserve, designed to streamline your stride and help protect your body. Treat yourself to feel-good landings on an ultra-high stack of super comfy nitrogen-infused cushion that takes the edge off every step, every day. The Brooks Ghost Max 2. You know, technically, they're a form of self-care. Brooks, let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Ring. From package deliveries to lonely pets, Ring cameras and doorbells make it easy to check in from anywhere, right from your phone. Be there with Ring. Learn more at ring.com.
Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. As you can see, today we're going to be talking about prayer plants. And like I do in every episode, I'm going to take a second at the beginning here to do our giveaway winners before diving into prayer plants, their history, and how to care for them. So every episode, I pick 2 people to win Plant School podcast giveaway, and it's sponsored by Market Botany. They send you a package that includes their prop drops, which is a water propagation aid that you simply put into your water propagations, and it really helps them take off. And they also send you a bottle of leaf shine. And if you want to check out their products, you can do that anytime you would like to. You can go to marketbotany.com. You can even use our code that we have. It's Plant School Podcast. No capital letters, no spaces, and that will give you a discount on your order. And I choose 2 winners, one from Apple Podcasts who has left a review. So if you listen there and would like to win, go ahead and leave a review. It's as easy as that. And then I also take someone from Spotify. For those of you that listen on that platform, all you have to do is comment down below on this episode, and that will enter you in for next episode's giveaway. So let's get into our winners. Our first one from Apple Podcasts. This reviewer's username is #LoveTheBible. Love the username. And they said, I just found this podcast, and let me just tell you, this has saved my life. I am just getting back into taking care of plants, and this podcast has been so helpful. I have never liked ferns, but listening to the episode on ferns makes me like them a little bit more. Thank you for doing this podcast and helping me get back into houseplants. Thank you so much for that kind review. It warms my heart to have someone else get on the fern train, because I love ferns. I think they're so cool. Does that mean I'm great with them? I don't know about that. So go ahead and email me, tenneyplants@gmail.com, tenneyplants@gmail.com, and I will get that package sent your way from Market Botany. And then over on Spotify, last week, I asked you guys to comment on our last episode, just your experience with composting, because our episode was all about composting. And our winner today is Lexi. She said, I'm just getting started with composting, and I love it. And then she also mentioned, I've just started listening to your podcast, and it by far is my top podcast to listen to. Thank you so much, Lexi. I'm so glad that you've joined in. Email me at tenneyplants@gmail.com, and I will get you your giveaway package sent your way as well from Market Botany. And for those of you listening right now on Spotify and you want to enter into next episode's giveaway, I'm going to have you go ahead and comment if you own a prayer plant, and if so, what kind. If you don't own one, tell me what kind you would get. But anyways, comment something. Like I've said before, I'm not picky of like what counts and what doesn't. Tell me about your prayer plants if you have one, and you will be entered in to win next episode's giveaway. All right, so let's start our conversation about prayer plants. And when I am talking about prayer plants, there is a little bit of confusion because it is a common name that is applied to multiple plants. But most often, the name prayer plant is associated with Maranta Leuconeura. There are some calatheas that fall into this category as well. But today I'm going to be focusing on Maranta Leuconeura because that is the one that is truly thought of as the prayer plant. So that's what we're focusing on today. If you have a calathea that you call a prayer plant, that's fine, you can call it that, but just know that the care that I'm talking about is for the Maranta. So the prayer plant is a rhizomaceous plant, meaning that they have underground stems, and that's kind of how they spread. Their leaves are these medium oval-sized leaves, and they have these very fine hairs on their leaves, so they kind of feel like velvety, but they have really pretty coloring. There's two main cultivars that come with the prayer plants. There's Maranta Erythronera, which has these like really dark interveinal areas, and then the actual veins of the plants are a really striking red. And then there's also another cultivar called Maranta Kerchovena. It is bright green with dark green spots, and both of these are considered under like the umbrella of Maranta Leuconeura. These are just two different cultivars within that umbrella. But the Kerchovena looks a little bit different, so it's a bright green with dark green spots. And this plant is also nicknamed the 10 Commandments plant because it often has 10 dark green spots on each of its leaves. Other common names for this particular cultivar is rabbit's foot or rabbit's track or the green Maranta. And prayer plants, they do flower. Their flowers are most often white or purple. They're pretty small. It's not like they really pop out at you. It's really not the main thing that people look for when compared to its foliage because those leaves are so pretty, but they are capable of flowering in your homes. And the whole reason why it's called a prayer plant is because its leaves have the ability to fold up and resemble hands in prayer. So this is through a process that the plant has. It's called nyctinasty, or more specifically, foliar nyctinasty, and it's caused by changing water pressure in their little petiole, which is that area at the base of the leaf. So the water pressure is changing in there, and that causes them to go upright and straight, or kind of relax and start bending down. And I remember, so I covered this episode in one of my very first episodes when my husband was still on this podcast and plant school was quite a bit different. And I remember I had never heard of the term nyctinasty, and it's such a random scientific word. Anyways, I remember asking you guys, like, if you listen to this episode, like, comment nyctinasty. And up to the day that I deleted those episodes, of course, and kind of started a new leaf of plant school, but I would still get people commenting that, and it always made me laugh. I would forget that we had even asked that, and it had been like a year or more, and someone would come on and comment it, and it just took me way back. So if you guys do happen to be bored and you're on Instagram and follow Plant School Podcast, feel free to do it, because it was just kind of like a fun little inside joke that would always make my day. Anyways, so that's the process that they're using to go up and down, and it's not really clear why prayer plants have evolved to have their leaves fold up and then fold down, but there are some hypotheses as to why. So there's the idea that it could help them maximize light absorption. It could be to aid in the shedding of sitting water on its leaves. It could help with temperature regulation, or it could prevent photoperiod disruption from the moonlight, and that's why it folds up so that the moon can't be disrupting and starting photosynthesis at night. Or it could be to inhibit herbivores from eating the plant. So there's a lot of different ideas, but it's not completely clear as to why. And this is not the only plant that has foliar nyctinasty. There's a lot of plants. A lot of your legumes in the Fabiaceae family do this. Your Oxidalaceae family members do this, like your clovers. And then also plants like daisies and crocuses, tulips, California poppies that will have this nyctinasty process going on where they fold up at different times of the day. And moving on from what the prayer plant is, let's talk about what they symbolize. So this plant is most commonly associated with the symbol of gratitude. And this is because the daily practice of prayer is usually one of gratitude. So if you're ever wanting to extend some gratitude to someone, this could be the perfect plant to kind of send that message across. It's also known to symbolize an open heart and hospitality because its leaves open up each day. And some other symbols it's been tied with is meditation, tranquility, protection, and fortune. Kind of a Zen plant overall, I would say. And the prayer plant, they are native to tropical forests in Central and South America. You will find them sprawling along the forest floor, and they are particularly found in Brazil. That's kind of mainly where they're at. But they are a sprawling plant because of those underground stems, those rhizomes that are constantly growing and extending this plant on the forest floor. All right, so let's get into their history. This is my favorite part. So the prayer plant holds cultural significance with many tribes in South America. Some believe that it holds spiritual powers. They would use it in rituals and ceremonies that were related to healing and protection. They also believe that the prayer plant had its ability to close its leaves at night because it was giving a sign of reverence and respect for nature. Some species of the Maranta family have actually been important food sources, particularly the Maranta arundinaceae, or the arrowroot. So they would take its roots, they would make a flour, and it's something that they would use to help with indigestion, treating UTIs, treating poison, and they would also use it as a poultice. So that's where you crush up the plant material and place it on your skin, and they would treat smallpox sores with the arrowroot plant. And I believe this plant is still eaten today. I'm not 100% sure on it, but I'm pretty sure that they still eat it today. But moving from its kind of indigenous roots, it was first discovered and formally classified in the late 18th century during expeditions to the New World from Europe. So the Maranta plant was named after Bartolomeo Maranta, who was an Italian physician in the 16th century. This physician, he was known for his work on medicinal plants, and they kind of named this after him to honor him. But once they had discovered the prayer plant, they brought it back, and it quickly became a popular houseplant because it was really easy to care for, had a beautiful, striking appearance, and it was a very popular choice in the Victorian-era households. And you could see it in their parlors and their conservatories. And any plant that could survive in the Victorian era and was popular, then you know it's got to be a hardy plant because they didn't have AC and cooling. They didn't have heating that worked really well back then. So the Victorian era is known for their palms, for the cast iron plant, and also the prayer plant. And you know that these plants are meant to stand the test of time. So you won't be surprised that it's still a very popular houseplant. It's one that you can often find in big box stores. I feel like every time I go, I see some type of Maranta, whether it's the Ethronera or the Kirchovena or the rabbit's foot, the Ten Commandments plant. Both of those are very popular, and you'll see them everywhere. It's estimated that they make up about 2% of the foliage plants produced in Florida greenhouses. Just the fact that they make up a percentage of the hundreds of plants being produced for houseplant stores around the nation tells you that they are quite popular. And that's kind of a wrap on their history, and I want to spend the second half of this episode telling you exactly how to care for them, keep them happy, because this is a plant that can last you quite a while. That's actually my last question I go over, is how long does this plant live? And it's quite a long time. I will tell you at the end how long it's known to live in your home. But let's start with how to water it. So you want to water according to the soil. So when the top inch or two is dry, that is when this plant needs water. They can get damaged from dry pockets in the soil. So if you notice the leaves are limp, but you are watering it and you just aren't sure what's going on, it seems like it's dehydrated, try aerating the soil. You can use a pencil or a crochet hook or some other thin projectile and just kind of break up that soil and try soaking it again. Hopefully that can fix the problem. If you ever deal with yellow leaves that have a black base, that is a sign of overwatering. It's having root rot problems in its soil and with its roots. So slow down on the watering. You can actually combat root rot by pulling out the plant and washing away the soil, looking at the roots, any that are brown or black and mushy, cut those out and remove them. Keep the ones that are firm and are white in color and repot it with some new soil, and that generally will take care of any root rot problems, and the plant can kind of slowly recover from that. Prayer plants are known to prefer distilled, filtered, or rainwater. That's what's considered best, because tap water can kind of add up in its minerals and salts and damage the leaves. You'll see it in leaf spots on the leaves. I have had a prayer plant for about, I think it's been about 6 years. I have used tap water the entire time, and I believe that where I am, we have decently hard water. It's not the best, not the worst, and I haven't noticed these leaf spots yet. But if you're having a problem with it, it could be your tap water. So switching to distilled, filtered, or rainwater can help with that. And being from the humid forest floors, they do love extra humidity. So putting it in your bathroom or grouping it with other plants or putting it by a humidifier are all great ways to keep those humidity levels. If you have brown leaf tips, that could indicate that they need more humidity. So that's something to keep in mind. Let's move on to lighting needs and kind of where to be putting them in your home. So they prefer bright and direct sun. They are often marketed as a lower light plant, and yes, they can handle it. They're from the forest floor, but they will thrive in bright and direct sun and do so much better there. And they will tolerate short periods of direct sunlight, but it should not be in direct sun the whole day, of course. If that happens, you will notice that the leaves start to fade in color. They could scorch if they're getting too much direct sunlight, or they get big brown areas where it looks like your plant is getting burned. So you do want to keep it in an area where it's just bright and direct sun. It's being filtered through a curtain or something like that. Also, when you're putting it in your home, be aware that they don't do great with fluctuating temperatures, so windowsills or doorways. I know I mentioned humidity can cause crispy edges, but also those crispy leaf edges could be from also dealing with a hot, dry location, whether it's by a heater or a hot window. Their kind of ideal temperature range is 81 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's 27 to 16 degrees Celsius. And for any of you that are in planting zones 10 through 12, so quite warm areas, they can be grown outdoors full-time. Or in the summer, you can be taking them outside in a shaded location as well. When it comes to fertilizing your prayer plant, you want to fertilize when you see that they're actively growing. Usually this is in spring, but it is not always in spring. So when you notice your prayer plant is growing and sending out a lot of new leaves, you want to fertilize it with a 10-15-10. That's what I recommend. It's more of a all-purpose fertilizer, and the 10-15-10 is the NPK value of the fertilizer, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in your fertilizer. The higher P, the phosphorus, kind of helps with flowering, which I always like to see in prayer plants, but I did mention they are small. But I do like using a 10-15-10 just because I do know that this is a houseplant that will flower. All right, let's move on to its soil needs, how to repot one. Honestly, the prayer plant doesn't need to be repotted too often because they do have smaller roots. They tend to be more shallow. So if you see roots growing out of the drainage holes, or it's drying out super quick and it just seems to be all root, no soil, definitely repot it. Put it in a pot that's about 1 to 2 inches bigger than the one you have already, and get a well-draining soil that has a lot of organic matter. I tend to use a succulent soil mix with my prayer plants, and they do very well in that. Moving on to pruning one, it's pretty easy. You just prune out the leaves when they have yellowed or they are completely dead. If your prayer plant is getting really leggy because they do kind of sprawl, you can kind of trim it up and prune them back. Never remove more than 25% of a plant at a time, or else it can be quite a shock to them. And those pieces that you do prune off that are alive, of course, you can propagate them. They are super easy. You place them in water, or you can place them in soil, whichever you prefer. Make sure that those nodes, those little nubs or bumps on the stem, are being submerged in water or submerged in soil so that they can start new roots. Using a rooting hormone is encouraged. You can either use powder, or if you're using it in water, you can use something like prop drops from Market Botany. I mentioned that at the beginning of the podcast. And roots will start growing from there. If you did decide to do it in water, you can transfer them when the roots are about anywhere like 1/2 inch to 2 inches long. And you can either put it in a new pot and create an entirely new plant. You can put it back into the pot where your original plant was growing to give it new life and help it be a bushier plant. Whatever your situation is, those are 2 great options. Another way to propagate them, though, is by division. So you can literally split them apart and take one piece, put it in a pot, the other piece, put that in a pot. Because they do have those underground stems, that is why you can be dividing them. Sometimes you have to cut through a few of the underground stems, and it's totally fine. It will bounce back from that. Those are kind of the main 2, division and cuttings. There are seeds to Maranta plants, but they are so difficult to germinate, so most people will just stick with cuttings or division. All right, and I just have a few more points to make with prayer plants care. The first one being how to deal with pests. So they most often get spider mites or mealybugs. And to be honest, pests can be a little bit tough with them because there are so many nooks and crannies for these pests to hide in with the prayer plant. And then the velvety leaves, you don't want to be damaging those fine hairs. So it can be a little bit hard. I would say the best option is to avoid getting them. Avoid super dry and bright conditions where spider mites thrive. Keep them away from other plants dealing with spider mites or mealybugs or any other pest. But if you are dealing with them, you can always wash them off with lukewarm water in the shower. I like to get cotton swabs and dip them in rubbing alcohol and wipe off those pests manually. Or you can use a pesticide to spray on them. You can use neem oil. Spider mites definitely need a variety of methods because they do reproduce so fast and they build up immunity quite fast. Whereas mealybugs, I feel like the cotton swab method is always my go-to. All right, I'm going to throw some extra care tips for you. And then my last question is, how long do they live? So some extra care tips. Just be aware that old yellow leaves are normal. You can remove them when they have fully yellowed and they are dead. If it's a new leaf and it turns yellow, that is a sign to kind of take a look at it. See if there's any pests, see if it's a watering problem, etc. But otherwise, the old leaves will yellow and die naturally. And these plants are not toxic, so they are safe for pets and kids, and you don't have to worry about any incidences of them accidentally eating it and it causing problems. My last tip is about cleaning their leaves. Since they are quite velvety, you can gently shower them down, or you can use a soft brush, and that way you aren't damaging that velvety, fine-haired surface of their leaves. All right, and my last question that I promised, how long do prayer plants live? So they have been known to happily live as a houseplant in someone's home for anywhere from 40 to 70 years, which is astounding. There's not too many houseplants that can rival that. Perhaps there are some, but this one has a very long life if you keep it happy and are giving it the care that it needs. And hopefully after this episode, you are completely capable of doing so. Anyways, that concludes this episode of the Plant School podcast. Thank you so much for being here and listening, and I hope that in 2 weeks you will join me for a brand new episode. Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode, and you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School Podcast.